Army. I spent the year living with Gloria. She had kids only 2 years younger than me. It made living there very awkward. I could understand where they were coming from. They see me, a kid, essentially their age, sleeping with their mom, and now living here. Their mom went as far as to tell them to respect me like they would respect a stepfather. It was beyond awkward living in that house. The kids would stare at me every day. They would essentially dog me out. I don't know how I lasted a year with her. She was rich though. She bought me everything, gave me cash, and all I had to do was please her in the bedroom. Wherever I lacked, she taught me. To make things worse, her husband had died less than a year ago. He had a massive heart attack. He was a mechanic at the airport and had a huge life insurance policy that she collected on. With that, she opened her own beauty salon and ventured into business on her own. I had no job, no real skills. All I had was what was in my pants. She kept me a secret from her family for most of the time we were together. One day, out of the blue, she invited me to her brother's house to meet her parents. Turns out, she wanted to marry me. I was still 17 and a runaway. I would continue to be a runaway until I turned 18. I also had no interest in marrying her. This woman was crazy. She would call me her dead husband's name sometimes. She would, out of the blue, get mad at me that I did not have a job, almost like she forgot what our arrangement was. There was no job I could get at 17 that could sustain her house and her kids. I had no interest to playing stepdaddy to kids my own or any age at that. Her parents cussed me out, and her brother threatened to kill me. Gloria defended being with me and threatened to cut her family off her money if they didn't go along with it. Needless to say, that night I ran away from her like I did so many other placements. I had a few months before I turned 18 and I was a free man. I had no idea what I would do, but I knew the streets. I knew where to eat, where to go for showers, and most of all, how to survive. As the months passed, I was able to secure a job at Jack in the Box. I had nothing else to do but work, so I worked my ass off. My 18th birthday came and went. I was still homeless, but I had a little money. I started to work nights and slept in drop-in centers during the day. Every now and then, when I needed a break, I would get a hotel for the night. It felt good to take a hot shower and sleep in a bed. It beat the nights I spent sleeping by train tracks and in abandoned buildings. The thing about Tucson is they made it illegal to be homeless. If they caught you sleeping somewhere, you would get arrested for trespassing and urban camping. The system was beyond crazy. They would arrest me, and I would sit in jail for a day waiting to see a judge. The judge would give me time served and a fine to pay, knowing I couldn't afford to pay the fine. So eventually, they would haul me back in jail for failing to pay the fine and add another fine for failing to pay the first fine. It went on like this for nearly a year for me. I was getting tired of being homeless and being a nothing. As that white judge would say, another black statistic. I decided to join the military. At first, I went to the Marine recruiter. I was brown, so they asked me my religion. When I told them I was Muslim, they said I could not join because they couldn't trust me. They guarded the president, so they told me to try the army since they would take anyone. I didn't know being a Muslim excluded me from branches of the armed forces. I tried the Navy and the Air Force with essentially the same attitude. So I finally stepped into the Army recruiting office. The first thing I asked was if my religion was an issue. They promptly said no, and acted surprised the other branch recruiters would even imply that. I went to MEPs a week later to take my ASFAB and medical test. I scored really high on my test, but had two issues. I was underweight, and many of the jobs I qualified for required a high school diploma instead of a GED. I thought I was screwed. My recruiter enrolled me into an alternative school where I can turn in my GED, do a few credits worth of work, and get a high school diploma. Did I mention I've always been smart? I was able to complete all the credits needed to get my diploma in less than a week. During that time, my recruiter stuffed me with food 3 times a day and told me to just sit somewhere. I had to gain 10 pounds to meet the weight requirement for my height. Alhamdulillah, praise be to God, I was able to meet it. My recruiter was a Hispanic man. He would bring me tons of home-cooked Hispanic foods that his wife had cooked. He would make me eat huge plates of it. I don't remember his name, but he was kind to me. Wherever he is, if one day he reads this, I just want to say, thank you. Your kindness may have meant nothing to you, but it was the very first time someone was kind to me and had no ulterior motive. I qualified for a counterintelligence job, but that didn't ship out for nearly a year. So, I joined the infantry. That shipped out in a month. I just had to lay low and stay away from the police till then. The month dragged by, but I swore into the Army and got into the van headed to the airport. I was excited. I was actually going to be something. I wasn't going to be dead or in jail by the time I was 18. I was going to be a soldier fighting on the front line. I was going to make money and not be homeless anymore. Most of all, I would have friends and respect. I arrived at Fort Benning, Georgia the next day. As soon as we entered the gate, the bus stopped and several drill sergeants entered the bus, yelling and shouting. "Where's all my goddamn infantry at?" one drill sergeant shouted. All the infantry stood. "Did I tell you retarded sons of whores to stand the fuck up?" he shouted. We all sat back down. "Goddamn, privates! Did I tell you dumb motherfuckers to sit down, huh?" We were confused. I didn't know if I was supposed to sit down or stand up. "When I say something shit sticks, your first and last words are drill sergeant. You got that, privates?" he blared at us. "Drill sergeant, yes, drill sergeant," we all shouted. "All my infantry get off the damn bus," he commanded. "Drill sergeant, yes, drill sergeant," we replied. We all got up and started to collect our bags. "You dumb shit stains, get off the damn bus," he shouted. At this moment, the other drill sergeants all got in our faces shouting and hurrying us along. They put us in formation. "All you other freak MOs, put your heads in your lap. You don't deserve the honor of looking at the infantry," one of the drill sergeants commanded. All of our badges were thrown into a pile before us. We had less than a minute to get our bag and get back in formation. Of course, we failed. Our drill sergeant took the opportunity to call us names and make us do push-ups. Once we were finally able to get it done the way he liked, he got us in 2 lines of 2. We had 3 miles to run to finish processing in. By the time we got there, I was out of breath. But I would be here for a few days to get my shots, IDs, and uniforms. Then we had to grab our bags again and jog a couple miles down range. The first day of actual basic training was brutal. We were divided into our training platoons and stood in formation in front of them. We were going to be introduced to our drill sergeant. 2 black men approached us. They glared at us like they were not happy with what they saw. "God fucking damn! Ain't this the sorriest sacks of shit I've seen in a long fucking time?" the shorter drill sergeant said. He frowned. I don't know what it was, but apparently every other word in the drill sergeant's vocabulary was something vulgar. The taller drill sergeant just glared at us. "I'm Drill Sergeant Billy, and this is Drill Sergeant Walters. We are here to mold you sacks of shit into men. From this day until you graduate, we are your fucking daddies. When you graduate, punch the man that raised your worthless ass in the damn nose. Not a man stands before me here," Drill Sergeant Billy shouted and spat on the floor. Drill Sergeant Walters stepped forward with the canteen in hand. "Here at Fort Benning, we force hydrate. So when I say drink water, you shout, 'Drink water,' as loud as you can, and drink your whole canteen." He paused for a moment and paced in front of us, his canteen still in the air. "Once you have drank it all, put it over your head like this," he shouted, demonstrating how it should be done. He walked back in front of us and shouted, "Drink water!" We all grabbed our canteens and drank as quickly as we could. As we were drinking, the drill sergeant got in our faces shouting nonsense. My stomach was beyond full as I put my canteen over my head as instructed. I felt like I was going to puke if I moved too quickly. Apparently, I was not the only one. The man behind me threw up all over the back of my boots. "What the holy fuck is this, Private?" Drill Sergeant shouted in the man's face. Something about seeing and hearing someone throwing up triggers others to gag and vomit. Several others puked, followed by others. The drill sergeants looked at us with disgust. "Front-leaning rest position, you retarded fucks!" Drill Sergeant Walters shouted. I couldn't believe he was going to make us do push-ups and all this throw-up. But we did. Others were still throwing up as they did push-ups. There was not much vomit by me, but the smell of it was everywhere. I don't know how long that went on, but eventually we all got to shower. After we showered, we were instructed on how to make our bunks. The drill sergeant destroyed our falsely made bunks many times until we eventually got it done right. Before we went to bed, we all had to go around and say where we were from and why we joined the Army. I guess here is where I made my mistake. When it was my turn, I spoke on being a Muslim and speaking Arabic, my desire to translate it in the Army. The stare that Drill Sergeant Walters gave me made my hair stand on end. 4 weeks passed by without an incident. I was doing great and was in the top of my class. Most of this was cake for me. I grew up fighting, living in the street and running from cops, so the physical training and stress was nothing to me. Over those weeks, Drill Sergeant Walter's stare never left me. It seemed like something was brewing in him. There was a hate, a disdain there for me. It couldn't be because I was black, because so was he. I became weary of him. His hate for me was revealed. In the brief moments of free time I had in the training bay, I read my Quran. Others slept or polished their boots. Some wrote letters to their families. It was our free time, so we found a way to make it worth it. As I was reading, there was suddenly a dark shadow blocking my light. I looked up to see Drill Sergeant Walters. My heart sank. I could feel something was about to happen. "What you reading there, Private?" he asked. "Drill Sergeant, my Quran, Drill Sergeant," I replied. "So you're reading some terrorist bullshit as we are at war with terrorists that read that same bullshit?" he said loudly. Anger boiled in me. I guess he could see it in my eyes. He smiled darkly. "Does that make you mad, Private?" he asked. "Drill Sergeant, no, Drill Sergeant," I lied. His smile deepened and he snatched my Quran out of my hands. "I bet you want a suicide bomb now, huh, Private?" he shouted, waving my Quran in the air. Drill Sergeant Walters walked around the bay. "Listen closely, privates. This is the face of terrorism," he shouted, using my Quran to point at me. "Watch this terrorist closely. It's his people who are killing your brothers in arms. His people that stole our planes and crashed them into the towers. His people that read this same shit book that he reads," Drill Sergeant Walters said. He opened my Quran to a random page and spat in it. "I would not want this fucker with me in a firefight against his own people," he shouted and threw my Quran across the bay. I glared at the drill sergeant. My first impulse was to rip out his throat. "You want your book of goat fuckers, Private?" he shouted at me. I nodded. "Go crawl on your hands and knees like the bitch you are and get it." I started to walk over to my Quran. "On your knees, Private! Crawl like the bitch you are!" he shouted again. I reluctantly got on my knees and crawled to my Quran. As I went to pick it up, he stepped beside me. "Pick it up with your mouth, bitch!" he shouted in my face. "Drill Sergeant, yes, Drill Sergeant!" I shouted angrily. I leaned forward and gently bit my Quran and crawled like a dog back to my bunk. The drill sergeant laughed hard. Many of the other initial entry soldiers laughed with him, shaking their heads at me. "Lights out, privates!" he shouted and turned out the lights. I didn't get much sleep that night. Not like sleep was something we got much of anyway. I felt like I was trapped in an enemy encampment. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be homeless again. I didn't want to let another bigot be the cause of my failure. I decided to let it go and tough it out. I prayed and cried on my mat. I was so angry and felt so disrespected. I wanted to slit his throat while he slept. The next day we were going to the range. I was paranoid the whole time there. No one wanted to partner up with me. I could feel everyone's stares and hear their whispers. I knew I was going to have to fight many of these guys if I was going to survive basic training. That day was one of the longest days of my life. When we got back to the training bay, I hit my bunk and just wanted to sleep. I wanted to get through the few weeks left as fast as I could. But unfortunately, the drill sergeant had gotten into the heads of the other trainees. They thought I was a terrorist plant. They thought it was their duty to kill me. As I lay on the top bunk sleeping, they crept beside me. One of them put his army-issued duffel bag over my face. My eyes snapped open. Before I could move, I was pulled off the top bunk hard. I had my breath knocked out of me. I gasped for air trying to swing. I felt a hard kick to my ribs and another in my jaw. I was hit and kicked repeatedly. "You fucking Haji," someone said. "You don't belong in our army," another said. "I'm going to kill you, fucking sand nigger," someone spit at me. My head was bashed into the ground. My world was spinning. I felt myself being dragged. They pulled me to the middle of the training bay. They bound my hands and beat me again here. My body felt heavy. I was bleeding from several places. They stripped me naked and tied me to the middle of training bay and laughed at me. Suddenly, the lights came on and everyone stood silently. "What's going on here, privates?" Drill Sergeant Walters shouted. When he saw me, beaten, naked and tied, he smiled and walked over to me. "Ah, you all went terrorist hunting," he said, his smile never leaving his face. He walked to my bunk and found my Quran. I kept it under my pillow as I slept. I wanted it close to me at all times. He opened it and ripped out a random page. "Where is Allah, Private?" he asked me. I didn't answer. I don't think I could answer. I was barely conscious. "Open his mouth," Drill Sergeant Walters ordered the other privates. I was punched several times more and my mouth forced open. The drill sergeant ripped several more pages out of my Quran and shoved it down my throat. You know you're gonna die here, terrorist. As he ripped more pages and pushed them past my bloody lips into my mouth. You know what we do to dead terrorists? Drill Sergeant Walters asked. He unzipped his pants and started to urinate in my face. You're a terrorist, goat fucking God can't save you, he laughed. I guess this was it for me. I was gonna die beaten and pissed on in the military base, betrayed by those who took the same oath as me. Oh, Allah, forgive me, I said to myself, but it came out as a barely audible groan. What is that, Private? The drill sergeant asked and removed the now bloody pages of the Holy Quran from my beaten mouth. I met the drill sergeant's gaze. I started to say, Ashhadu alla ilaha illallah, but was stopped by a hard punch to my jaw. Blood dribbled down my chin. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulallah. I smiled as I said it. I was hit again. This time, I lost consciousness. They kept me there for 2 days torturing me and beating me. I was fed pages of my Quran, pissed on and beat every night. One of the privates even tried to waterboard me as I sat there naked and tied to the pole in the middle of the training bay. The night of the second day, the drill sergeant leaned down and whispered in my ear, I'm gonna kill you tomorrow, terrorist. New soldiers die all the time in training, he said, smiling, and left. I was beat again until I lost consciousness. I was wakened roughly the next day, untied and dressed. I could barely walk. 2 other privates essentially carried me to the training field. They were doing a live fire exercise. A drill sergeant stood above a muddy field that had barbed wire a foot off the ground. It was raining. The rain felt so good on my skin. I could hear the shots being fired and watched as privates crawled in the mud under the wire. I was shoved into the mud, my face held down under the muddy water. When they let me go, I jerked my head up and gasped for air. Go on, Private, the drill sergeant ordered me. He pointed to the barbed wire. I crawled under the first barbed wire in the mud. My whole body was on fire. I was in so much pain. I was about to stand and go to the next one. I was on my knees slowly getting up when I felt a sharp pain in my back. I was pushed forward, like I was punched hard. I screamed in pain and fell forward in the mud. I reached back to where the pain was and felt hot, sticky blood. You're shot, Private, Drill Sergeant Walters shouted. Say your prayer now. You'll be seeing your Allah soon. I turned to him with the last ounce of my strength. He was standing over me with the rifle pointed at me. I only fear Allah, I managed to say. I could hear a loud pop and then embraced darkness.